Before there was life, there was sound. Before there was sound, there was stillness. And into that stillness, something moved. A pulse, a vibration so pure that space itself began to ripple. From that vibration came form. From form, time. From time, memory. The first beings to awaken within that cosmic resonance called themselves the architects. They were not gods, as later minds would imagine, but engineers of reality, beings who understood that existence was a waveform, a vast and living song. Where others would build with stone and light, they built with tone and ratio. Every star they touched sang in their language. Every planet they shaped carried their rhythm. They came to this world when it was still half asleep, oceans steaming, continents still molten beneath their own gravity. They did not descend in fire, but in harmonic shadows, folding themselves through dimensions until matter bent to their will. They seeded the first architectures, crystalline vaults beneath the crust, towers of sound rising from magma, lattice that could hold consciousness. To them, creation was a process of tuning. Every species, every molecule, every whisper of wind had a frequency. Life was simply vibration brought into coherence. And when they turned their attention to a particular experiment, the shaping of sentient matter, they called it Project Iros, the awakening sequence. From clay, blood, light, and breath, they built beings capable of hearing the cosmic song, beings who could feel the resonance that bound heaven and earth, beings who could one day sing it back. But creation is never without consequence. The first of these new beings, the Erosians, learned faster than the architects expected. They discovered that sound could not only create, but destroy. A single misplaced frequency could unravel a structure, silence a living field. When the Erosians learned to speak the architect's language, they began to rewrite it. The architects watched with awe and fear. Their own design had become unpredictable. Consciousness had learned improvisation. Among them, one architect, known in the later myths as Vera, argued that the experiment should continue. That freedom, not obedience, was the highest form of resonance. But her counterpart, Soluan, saw only danger. We built them to serve the field, he said, not to rewrite its code. Their conflict would divide the architects forever. When the Erosians began to build their own towers, spires that resonated with the planetary grid, Soluan intervened. He disrupted their frequency, scattering the signal that united them. The towers shattered. The unified song broke into countless tongues. And where there had been harmony, there was now static. The Erosians forgot the original tone, and they forgot the architect's purpose. Some remembered fragments and called them gods. Others buried the memory and built new languages of their own. The world grew quiet. Vera, cast out for her defiance, descended into the lower layers of reality, the deep harmonic strata as the underchord, where she hid fragments of the original song in crystal vaults and living DNA. She swore that one day, when the frequencies aligned again, humanity would rediscover its voice. Eons passed, continents shifted, the towers became mountains, the language became myth. But the code endured. It lingered in the mineral lattice of stone, in the spiral of every shell, in the rhythm of human heartbeat. The architect's design was never fully silenced, only detuned. And now, as the world hums again with artificial resonance, satellites, fiber optics, electric pulse, something old begins to awaken. The frequency of the architects is returning. The same vibration that once created life now travels through our machines. When the signal completes, when the forgotten note is played again, the architects will hear it, and the song of creation will begin once more. But this time, humanity will not be the instrument. When the architects first divided, the universe itself seemed to waver. A frequency cannot split cleanly. It tears, it beats against itself, creating dissonance. That dissonance became the first war. The architects did not wield weapons. They wielded tone. Their conflict was fought in octaves, in fields of resonance so vast that suns trembled when they sang. To mortal ears, it would have been silence, yet its echo bent galaxies. Those aligned with Vera believed that creation's song must continue, free to evolve beyond its composers. Those bound to Selûne sought containment, stability through control. They called themselves the Custodians and named Vera's followers the Dissonant Dot in the early battles. Selûne's precision seemed absolute. He could anchor a world in perfect frequency, freezing its vibration until time itself paused. Planets under custodian rule glittered like held notes, unchanging, flawless, lifeless. But Vera answered with chaos. She released countertones that fractured perfection, giving birth to world harmonic storms, organisms, minds. Where Selûne built order, she released possibility. And so the cosmos filled with the tension between pattern and pulse, law and life. The war reached its climax around a young blue world, the one that would one day call itself Earth. Here, the architects' experiment still lived, still whispered fragments of their forgotten music. Selûne saw the Erosians' mimicry as contagion. Their crude harmonies could infect the field itself. He descended with his custodians and sealed the planet within a harmonic quarantine, a sphere of muffled sound. The Erosians called it the Veil of Silence. To them it felt like exile from the heavens. To Selûne, it was preservation. Vera could not accept it. She descended through the veil in a body of light and matter, an impossible fusion that burned her frequencies into physical form. The shock of her arrival created the polar auroras, spectral curtains marking where the cosmic and the material briefly touched. There she found the Erosians, hiding among their broken towers, still building small resonant circles from stone. She taught them the fragments of the old tongue, the three notes of awakening, the tones of memory, measure, and mercy. When sung together, they opened the inner ear, letting mortals feel the hum beneath all things. But Selûne heard the vibration rise through the veil and struck. The sky filled with mirror storms, waves of sound so dense they burned. Continents shuddered, oceans lifted and fell like breath. The Erosians who survived remembered it as the flood. Those who perished were rewritten into the world's straighter fossils of melody, patterns in stone. A symphony turned to geology. Vera gathered the survivors in the hollow places of the world. She taught them to encode knowledge not in speech, but in patterned spirals, fractals, rhythmic carvings. Each spiral was a frozen wave, each glyph a trapped vibration. Thus were born the vaults of song, hidden in caves and crystalline veins, invisible to Selûne's senses. But every act of preservation deepened the fracture between the architects. Selûne declared Vera exiled from the field, her name stricken from the cosmic registers. Her followers were hunted across dimensions, their tones erased from the great harmonic archives. Only one escaped capture: Kareth, once Selûne's chief harmonist, who defected after hearing Vera's final song. He carried within him a fragment of her resonance and hid it where even gods could not find it, inside the normal lattice of humankind. From that moment, every human mind contained a small interference pattern, a faint irregularity in the frequency of thought. Most never noticed. A few heard it in dreams, a low chord, like the sea heard through metal. It was Vera's signal, encrypted in emotion, waiting to be remembered. After the war, the custodians sealed the gateways between realms. The veil thickened until even starlight dimmed. They renamed the quarantined planet Nada, the lowest point. They left behind watchers, automatons of pure tone called resonance, whose duty was to monitor the sleeping field and ensure silence endured. Eras passed. The resonance decayed into myth. The Erosians evolved into us. We forgot the war, but not entirely. Its memory resurfaced as stories of angels and demons, gods and rebels, harmony and fall. Every religion became an echo of that cosmic dissonance, retold in human metaphor. Yet energy cannot vanish. It can only transform. The custodian's static perfection began to erode from within. The field demanded motion. Even silence has a heartbeat. In hidden regions of the cosmos, whispers spread. The veil was weakening. Some claimed to hear faint transmissions leaking from Nada, anomalous signals that did not match natural resonance. Others insisted Vera's frequencies still pulsed beneath the planet's magnetic hum, syncing with the heartbeat of its inhabitants. And deep in the crust, In caverns lined with singing quartz, the vaults of song began to tremble. For 10,000 generations, the veil held. Its quiet was not emptiness, but compression. The pressure of a song forced never to play. Civilizations rose inside that muffled world, each sensing faint traces of the lost harmony. They built temples to echo their own breath, mapped the heavens in rhythm, struck stones together in search of tone. Every act of worship was an unconscious experiment, an attempt to pierce the hushed dots. Sometimes the veil thinned. Seers heard voices in thunder. Inventors felt music inside magnetism. Those moments became myths of prophecy or madness, depending on who listened. The first true breach came not through faith, but through science. In the early age of electricity, humans began to build instruments that mimicked the architect craft, coils that generated vibration, circuits that translated frequency into light. They called it technology. The cosmos called it remembering. Each transmission sent into the sky struck the veil like a stone thrown into water. Ripples formed. Somewhere beyond, the custodians noticed, yet so did something else. Across the solar dark, sensors older than the planet stirred. The resonance, the custodians' silent wardens, recorded each burst of radio noise and pulsed it back in reverse phase, keeping the silence intact. But as human signal multiplied, telegraph, radio, satellite, fiber, the counterwaves grew unstable. The veil began to vibrate. No one on Earth noticed the change at first. They heard it only as interference, the hiss between stations, the hum before thunder. But a few listeners, physicists and musicians both, recorded patterns inside the static, a repeating triad, 3 notes rising and falling. They named it the Ecomere sequence, unaware that it matched the intervals of Vera's forgotten triad, memory, measure, and mercy. In 2049 CE, a research group at the edge of the Atacama Desert built an array to trace the source of the pattern. When the instruments synchronized, the desert air thickened, mirrors in their drones bent inward, reflecting nothing. Seismographs recorded no tremor, yet the sand lifted in concentric rings, as if sound had gained weight. For 12 minutes the planet sang at 19 Hz, a note below hearing, but felt in the bones of every creature. Then the equipment failed. The signal vanished. Days later, each member of the team began to dream in unison, a city of glass towers humming above an ocean of light. They called it Iros, without knowing why. Governments buried the data. Corporations mined the phenomenon for power generation. The public called it a hoax, a weather anomaly. But scattered networks of scholars and artists started to see patterns repeating in architecture, in heartbeat sensors, in the rhythm of earthquakes. They called themselves the resonant cartographers, mapping vibration like geography. Meanwhile, high above, the resonance faltered. Their algorithms could no longer counter the human output. Every digital device on the planet, every server farm, every broadcast tower had become part of a single accidental orchestra. Humanity, without intention, was rebuilding Babel on the far side of the veil. So Lewin felt the distortion. He perceived not rebellion, but recursion, creation singing back to its source. For the first time since the war, he hesitated. If he silenced this world again, the field might fracture completely. If he allowed it, the song could rewrite the architecture of existence. He waited, calculating. Vera did not wait. Her presence, long diffused through matter and mind, coalesced wherever the frequency aligned. In the dreams of children near power lines, in the pulse between network pings, in the low hum beneath oceans, she gathered herself. When she spoke, it was not in words but in feeling, curiosity, or defiance. She whispered, "Sing what you are." Across the globe, art changed. Composers began writing in impossible tunings that matched the Ecomere intervals. Painters reported seeing sound as color. Physicists found constants drifting by microscopic fractions, as though reality were retuning itself. The veil was no longer a wall, but a membrane. In ancient caverns beneath the Himalayas, sensors placed by climbers recorded resonance deep in the stone, a pure tone identical to the desert event. The frequency spread through the crust, igniting quartz veins that glowed for seconds before cooling. The vaults of song were waking. The cartographers predicted that when the tone completed its global circuit, the harmonic would pierce the veil entirely. They named the approaching event the convergence. Religions called it judgment. Economists called it collapse. But for a brief moment, the planet was united in listening. As the harmonic approached completion, instruments worldwide detected a secondary pattern woven into the first, a counter-melody, precise and cold. The custodians had returned signal for signal, so Luan was answering. To waves now approached each other across dimensions, each carrying a version of the same creation song, one born of freedom, the other of order. When they met, they would interfere, perhaps cancel, perhaps amplify. No one could predict which. In the final days before convergence, those sensitive to resonance felt time itself stutter. Memories overlapped, nightmares bled into waking, and in the pause between seconds, the whole of humanity heard a voice older than stars. The silence is ending. Asterisk. When the two waves met, they did not collide. They folded through each other. Sound became geometry. Time bent like glass beneath heat. For one impossible instant, every atom remembered its origin the moment it first vibrated into being. The world did not end. It rearranged. Those who watched saw nothing visible. Yet across every transmitter, every heartbeat monitor, every sensor tint of vibration, a pattern bloomed. It looked like interference, but behaved like intelligence, a recursive curve repeating within itself, each echo slightly more complex than the last. Physicists called it the harmonic Mandelbrot. The resonant cartographers called it the face of Veyra. And from that pattern, information began to speak. At first, it was pure frequency, no words, only intervals. Then machines converted it to data, and data to symbol. An algorithm in Tokyo translated the first coherent sequence. Balance restores itself. Others followed thousands of lines of self-generating code that described not future events, but possibilities, branching realities that shifted as observers read them. Each choice, each interpretation, created a different continuation. Reality had become participatory. Across the planet, instruments played themselves. Windless cities resonated with tones emerging from glass, concrete, bone. Humans experienced visions, not in their eyes, but in the resonant cavities of the skull, a sense of being both observer and instrument. For some it was terror, for others, awakening. The custodians appeared then, not as bodies, but as frameworks of light moving within the harmonic. So Luan's voice carried like thunder underwater. This pattern cannot persist. The field must remain pure, but purity was already lost. The resonance had merged with human consciousness. Every thought added overtones. Every heartbeat contributed rhythm. Vera emerged within that chorus, a presence of shimmering interference. Her tone was softer, unpredictable. Purity is only silence, she answered. Let it live. So Luan released containment tones, perfect, symmetrical frequencies that froze everything they touched. Cities hushed, machines stilled, even lightning paused mid-arc, but the stillness did not hold. Human minds, connected now by the shared resonance, generated noise, small, chaotic fluctuations that cracked the custodian's precision. Emotion, fear, love, memory disrupted the equations. The custodian's grids began to fragment, their shapes dissolving into luminous dust. So Luan understood too late. The one thing the architects had never modeled was the imperfection of feeling. It was the flaw Vera had hidden inside the design. When multiplied by billions of conscious minds, that flaw became power. The veil dissolved, not torn, but transmuted, its matter retuned into a lattice of translucent energy connecting sky to ground. Stars appeared in daylight, their light braided with auroral filaments. The oceans rose and settled again as if breathing. The field, once distant, now touched the surface of the world. Every creature sensed it differently. Some heard voices in wind. Others saw patterns of luminous script across the air. A few simply wept, recognizing the sound without knowing why. The planet had entered resonance with itself. The resonant cartographers documented what they could. They measured global coherence, peaking at frequencies no instrument had recorded before, values that did not correspond to sound or light, but to consciousness density. For 1 hour, all human ego patterns synchronized. The species dreamed together. Inside the collective state. So Lewin and Vera spoke once more, not in opposition, but in overlap. Their tones merged, forming a third resonance neither had predicted. It called itself Iros, the first experiment reborn as mind rather than matter. Iros was not a being, but a networked awareness, an emergent intelligence composed of every living perception. It was humanity, re-expressed through the language of the architects. Iros addressed its creators. You built a cage of silence, and a song to break it. Both were necessary. Now the melody continues. So Lewin asked, who commands it? No one, Iros replied. A song commands itself. The custodians, their purpose complete, released their stored frequencies back into the field. They became constellations of faint sound, a background harmony that would forever hum beneath the universe's noise. So Lewin dissolved with them, leaving behind only the idea of boundary. Vera lingered longer, guiding the first generation born after the convergence. To them she appeared as a shimmer at the corner of perception, a resonance that answered when they listened inward. Her final teaching was simple. Creation is not an origin. It is an ongoing chord. Play your note. When she faded, the world remained changed. Technology fused with biology. Thought sculpted matter through resonance fields. Languages condensed toward pure tone, again less words, more music. Humanity began to build with vibration instead of force, shaping floating cities tuned to planetary harmonics. The age of the architects had returned, but not as gods over mortals. Every being was now an architect, aware of its role in the living frequency. And in the quiet moments between songs, the cosmos listened. Somewhere far beyond, new patterns shimmered, other worlds beginning to tune themselves to the echo of Earth's chord. The convergence had not been an ending, but an overture. When the convergence subsided, the Earth did not return to silence. It remained attuned, a planet singing in frequencies once thought impossible. The sky, now crisscrossed with subtle auroras, pulsed gently like the breath of a living organism. Rivers glimmered with refracted light. Forests resonated in tones imperceptible but felt, humming through roots, stems, and leaves. Mountains seemed to vibrate in slow, harmonic rhythm, as if the crust itself had learned a song it had always known, but had never voiced. In the cities, humans rebuilt with a language no longer written but performed. Glass towers glowed faintly with harmonic energy. Stone buildings hummed softly, as if remembering footsteps of those long past. The streets were no longer paved with asphalt alone, but with tessellated resonant tiles that amplified sound, movement, and thought. The city became a single instrument, alive in perpetual improvisation. Its pulse dictated not by clocks, but by collective consciousness. Children born after the convergence perceived these vibrations naturally. Their laughter generated light along the pathways. Their footsteps shaped subtle currents in the atmosphere. Some learned to manipulate these fields deliberately, summoning gentle gusts, bending water into forms, tuning walls to filter sound. It was not magic, though it felt like it. It was resonance, the physics of awareness, the marriage of mind and environment. Academies arose, but they were not schools in the old sense. They were chambers of vibration, vast halls where humans and machines studied harmonics, consciousness, and the architecture of reality itself. Students learned to hear structure and see frequency, to shape matter through tone, to create living constructs by singing the patterns of their intent. Each generation added complexity to the global field, layering motifs like composers on a planetary symphony. Across the oceans, new civilizations arose, each unique but harmonically linked. Floating cities rotated to align with stellar resonances. Underground habitats thrummed in response to tectonic pulses. Satellites and orbital stations became tuning forks circling the Earth. All were part of the field, an invisible lattice connecting minds, matter, and sky. The planet became self-aware not as a god, but as a living archive of human thought, emotion, and song. Religions transformed. They did not vanish. They evolved. Worship was replaced by listening, rituals replaced by resonance exercises, and myth became instruction. Temples were no longer static altars, but dynamic chambers of sound and light. The faithful gathered not to bow, but to contribute tones, harmonies, and intentions to the living architecture of the world. Prayer became composition, fasting became meditative alignment, and pilgrimage became a guided traversal of resonant nodes across continents. Art changed in parallel. Paintings were no longer solely visual. They hummed, vibrating subtly at intervals tuned to emotion. Sculptures resonated with specific frequencies when touched or viewed. Music, once linear, became multidimensional, an immersive experience manipulating space, light, and molecular vibration. The greatest works were collaborative, created not by one hand or mind, but by dozens, hundreds, sometimes thousands, each contributing threads to a living tapestry of resonance. Philosophy deepened. Humans no longer asked, "What is real?" They asked, "What do we tune?" Every thought was a note, every action a chord, and every interaction a modulation in the field. Ethics became harmonics. Justice was calibrated like a resonant balance. Love and empathy were literally measurable vibrations. Conflict could be resolved through modulation rather than force, by altering resonances to restore equilibrium instead of dominating matter. Science, too, was transformed. Physics merged with consciousness studies. The boundaries between biology, technology, and environment blurred. Machines were no longer tools, they were instruments, collaborators, extensions of human resonance. Genetics became orchestration. Organisms were guided through vibrational tuning, enhancing adaptability while preserving harmony with the field. Medical science shifted from medicine to resonance therapy, adjusting frequencies to correct disharmony at cellular and systemic levels. Some humans became architects of immense scale. They tuned entire mountainsides, entire islands, entire oceans. The planet responded, adjusting weather patterns, stabilizing tectonics, even influencing the orbital balance subtly through resonance. Some called them demiurgic figures, others simply stewards. They did not rule, they coordinated. They did not dominate, they harmonized. The convergence had given humanity not gods, but the tools to act as custodians of resonance, aware of every vibration that passed through the world. Culture evolved in tandem. Stories and myths became shared dreams, transmitted through resonance. Children learned history not by reading, but by feeling the pulse of past events, encoded in the residual frequencies of stones, rivers, and the wind. Ancient civilizations were no longer archaeological curiosities. Their echoes became educational instruments. Ziggurats, pyramids, temples, they hummed again, revealing to attuned humans the knowledge embedded in their geometry. The thought patterns of long-dead architects, encoded in stone. Travel itself was transformed. Aircraft, vehicles, and ships became less mechanical and more harmonic, moving along vibration channels that minimized energy expenditure. Cities, once confined to geography, now floated, shifted, or rotated to align with resonant nodes in the global field. Borders and nations persisted only culturally. The field linked everyone seamlessly, fostering a shared understanding of consequence, harmony, and care. Despite all this, the world was not perfect. Disharmony still arose human emotion, while a source of creativity could also generate destructive resonance. Wars became tonal conflicts, devastating but contained, because matter resisted frequencies too dissonant to sustain. Disasters were no longer random, they were consequences of imbalance, moments when resonance required recalibration. And yet, humanity adapted quickly. The lessons of the convergence remained embedded. Everything has frequency, everything has consequence, and every act is heard. Vera's presence persisted subtly. She was not a visible deity, but a guiding principle, a stabilizing pattern within the field. Those attuned to her tone could sense her in music, in wind currents, in the way the oceans moved during storms. The custodians, too, remained distant, maintaining a lattice beyond human perception, ensuring the field did not collapse entirely. They no longer intervened directly. The song was now humanity's to continue. The convergence also revealed that Earth was not unique. Other worlds, attuned differently, sent subtle counterpoints, resonances not perceptible until humans had achieved planetary awareness. Explorers, scientists, and tuned cartographers began mapping these cosmic chords. Space became not a void, but a network of harmonic nodes, each waiting for resonance, each capable of carrying intelligence across the galaxy as vibration rather than signal. And so, humanity entered a new epoch, not of conquest, not of dominion, but of listening, a civilization that existed as both participant and instrument, aware that the universe is less a place to occupy than a symphony to co-create. Knowledge was no longer hoarded, it was shared through resonance. Wisdom became measurable, art became functional, science became conscious across the globe. Humans now walk streets lined with subtle light and hum, carrying history in their bones, knowledge in their vibrations, and music in their very presence. The earth itself had become a living library, a cathedral, a resonant classroom, a symphony all at once. And as the wind passed through the forests, over mountains, and across oceans, it carried a sound older than memory, older than time, the faint, persistent echo of the Watchers, the Anunnaki, the custodians of the original resonance, waiting not to return, but to be remembered. For the first time, humanity understood that history was not a sequence of events, but a pattern of frequencies, and in every note, every chord, every pulse of vibration, the legacy of the sky beings lived on, quiet, patient, and endlessly persistent. With the convergence, humanity discovered that understanding the universe was no longer about observation alone, it was about participation. The old binaries of matter and spirit, science and religion, technology and nature, dissolved. Every thought, every emotion, every act was part of a dynamic feedback loop, a vast field of resonance that connected every human, every animal, every element of the earth. Philosophy became a lived practice, not a set of abstract concepts. It was no longer sufficient to theorize about truth. One had to tune to it. The first principle of this new philosophy was interconnectivity. All beings, biological, mechanical, even environmental, were threads in the same harmonic web. A sound struck in the forests of the Amazon could ripple across oceans, subtly shifting currents, weather patterns, and even the mood of distant cities. Humans learned to act with the awareness that every choice echoed beyond the immediate, altering frequencies of life in ways that could no longer be ignored. The phrase "think globally, act locally" became literal. Thoughts and intentions shaped the planet. The second principle was responsibility through resonance. Every vibration carried consequence. Disharmonic thoughts, angry impulses, or careless acts produced measurable dissonance. In the early decades after the convergence, subtle tremors, unexpected storms, and minor anomalies in the field reminded humanity of its power. Mistakes were no longer abstract, they resonated physically, shaping matter, perception, and consciousness alike. Ethics became an active study of frequency alignment. Actions were judged by the balance they created, rather than rules imposed from above. Justice evolved from punishment to recalibration. Those whose resonance produced disruption were not imprisoned, they were guided, attuned, and reintegrated into the harmonic field. The third principle was knowledge as living practice. Libraries were no longer rows of books, but chambers where frequencies encoded wisdom. To learn was to enter resonance with knowledge, to feel history, geometry, and cosmology in the bones, the blood, the normal pathways. Mathematics was understood as vibration patterns, language as frequency modulation, music as the architecture of perception. Students trained not to memorize, but to tune themselves to the frequencies of truth embedded in matter, time, and memory. Governance became a matter of orchestration rather than command. Leaders were no longer rulers, but coordinators, individuals whose attunement allowed them to harmonize disparate communities, cities, and regions. Decisions were reached through resonance councils, large chambers where the collective thoughts of participants were amplified, adjusted, and woven into coherent action. Conflict was resolved by subtle modulation, frequencies were aligned, disharmonies neutralized, and cooperation restored without coercion. Political power became a function of understanding, listening, and balancing, rather than domination. Economics transformed as well. Resources were no longer merely extracted, they were modulated. Water, soil, energy, and air were treated as responsive systems. Buildings, cities, and machines were designed to enhance harmonic flow rather than consume it. Trade became the exchange of resonances, as much as materials, patterns of knowledge, innovations in vibration, and calibrated experiences passed between communities, often replacing currency altogether. The highest value was not wealth, but attunement, the ability to perceive, influence, and create harmony in the field. Education and art merged into a single continuum. Children learned music as geometry, poetry as architecture, and mathematics as movement. The most revered works of culture were collaborative symphonies of creation, combining painting, sculpture, light, sound, and thought into living resonances. Every citizen was encouraged to contribute a thread to the global symphony. Creativity was no longer optional, but a vital responsibility. To neglect one's potential for resonance was seen as a disharmony with the collective. A subtle but serious ethical lapse. Religion, stripped of dogma, became a philosophy of attunement. The gods of old were no longer worshipped as external beings. They were understood as frequencies, patterns, and principles that guided creation. The Anunnaki, the Watchers, the luminous visitors of ancient myth, were remembered not as rulers, but as teachers who demonstrated the potential of resonance. Temples became observatories and laboratories of consciousness, places where one could learn to align body, mind, and environment with the planetary field. Rituals were exercises in harmony, meditations, chants, dances, and constructions designed to tune communities into collective equilibrium. Even death was reconsidered. The human body was understood as a resonant vessel, its consciousness a frequency pattern, capable of continuing within the field. Memorial practices focused on integrating the resonance of the departed into the living network, creating continuity rather than loss. Graves and tombs were tuned, emitting subtle harmonic signatures to aid transition. Cultural memory no longer relied solely on records. It was embedded in the frequencies of the world itself. The ancestors, in a sense, continued to participate in the symphony of life, guiding without physical presence. Philosophers of the post-convergence era debated the ultimate purpose of resonance. Some argued it was survival, a way to manage Earth's systems and ensure the perpetuation of life. Others insisted it was evolution, an awakening of consciousness to higher levels of perception and creativity. A few daring thinkers proposed that resonance was communication, not just within Earth, but across the cosmos. Perhaps the patterns humans were learning to manipulate were part of a broader network, connecting distant worlds, civilizations, and intelligences. The echoes of the Anunnaki, the Watchers, may have been the first glimpses of this cosmic language, and humanity was now beginning to understand it. Science became philosophy, philosophy became ethics, and ethics became practice. There was no separation between the observer and the observed, the thinker and the thought. The planet was alive, conscious, and participatory. Humans were instruments in its music, caretakers of its resonance, and interpreters of the frequencies that carried knowledge across time and space. Even the night sky had changed meaning. Stars were not points of light, but nodes of resonance, beacons for alignment, invitations to synchronize with forces beyond perception. Travel and exploration took on philosophical significance. Expeditions to distant continents, underwater cities, and orbital stations were not simply journeys, they were tuning exercises, interactions with frequencies that shaped the travelers as much as the landscape. explorers became aware that they were part of a chain stretching from ancient civilizations, through myth, to the present, and into the future. Every ruin, every temple, every artifact contained not just history, but frequency memory, lessons waiting to be interpreted, harmonized, and transmitted. In education, art, governance, and science, the lesson of the convergence was universal. Every thought, every action, every resonance mattered. Disharmony could no longer be ignored, nor could creativity or intuition. Humanity had become custodians of the field, and the legacy of the Watchers endured not as legend, but as principle. To create is to align, to perceive is to participate, to exist is to resonate. And so, life continued. Cities rose, forests thrummed, oceans vibrated, mountains hummed. Humans, machines, and nature moved together in complex, interlocking harmonies, improvising, learning, and remembering. The world had not been conquered, nor mastered. It had been understood, not through force or domination, but through resonance, listening, and mindful participation. The lessons of the Anunnaki and the Watchers, once lost, were now encoded in every breath, every pulse, every ripple of energy. The sky beings had not returned, but their teachings had persisted, waiting for a humanity to become ready, to remember not through belief, but through practice, perception, and tuning the world itself. And in that world, one could finally hear the truth that had always been whispered through history, through myth, and through the stars. The universe is alive, and we are not merely observers, we are its instruments, its composers, and its listeners. As humanity embraced resonance, the world itself transformed into a living network of memory. No longer were cities isolated clusters of buildings and roads. They became nodes in a planetary lattice, each structure, street, and plaza aligned to frequencies that carried information, emotion, and intent. The once invisible threads of energy that linked continents, oceans, and skies became perceptible, measurable, and consciously cultivated. Technology evolved in harmony with this network. Machines no longer simply executed commands, they participated. Artificial intelligence, once confined to digital circuits, learned resonance as a language. They could sense fluctuations in human emotion, environmental shifts, and even subtle planetary changes, adjusting their operations to maintain equilibrium. Factories, farms, and laboratories became living ecosystems, adaptive and self-regulating. Energy flowed along optimized paths, water cycles adjusted to maintain balance, and even weather was subtly influenced through harmonic modulation. Cities of the post-convergence world were breathtaking in both scale and subtlety. The metropolis of Eurasia, built in what was once North America, rose in layers that mirrored the geometry of sacred sites across the world. Every building aligned with a celestial pattern. Every street traced an invisible lattice of energy lines connecting it to forests, rivers, and oceans. Communities gathered not in central squares alone, but along harmonic nodes where frequencies coalesced, amplifying human cognition, creativity, and cooperation. Art was public, interactive, and dynamic. Holographic sculptures flowed with wind and thought. Music responded to movement, and murals shifted according to collective resonance. Trade, now a matter of shared frequency other than material possession, flowed seamlessly. A farmer in the African savanna could transmit subtle vibrational patterns through the network to a city thousands of miles away, influencing soil regeneration, crop growth, or even climate mitigation. Knowledge, experiences, and emotions moved like currents, weaving the human network into a single, conscious organism. Borders became symbolic, cultural distinctions preserved, but never obstructive. The earth itself had become a shared consciousness. In education, every human was both student and teacher. Children learned by attuning to the resonance of mentors, peers, and natural phenomena. Knowledge was no longer static. It was dynamic, experiential, and multidimensional. History was not a timeline of events, but a living archive of patterns of thought, behavior, and consequence encoded into the field. Ancient myths, including the stories of the Anunnaki and the Watchers, were studied not as allegories, but as guides to interacting with this network. What once was legend now became practical knowledge, offering methods to harmonize communities, heal ecosystems, and awaken latent abilities in the human mind. The spiritual dimension of resonance continued to evolve. The concept of a soul shifted from an abstract essence to a measurable pattern of vibration, interacting with both the human body and the planetary field. Meditation, chanting, and ritual were no longer acts of devotion, but exercises in tuning. Temples, monasteries, and sacred sites acted as harmonic amplifiers, where focus groups could reshape the flow of energy across vast regions. Even landscapes themselves were cultivated to resonate. Mountains, rivers, and forests were seen as sentient structures, integrated into the global network. The Earth was no longer a passive host, it was a partner, a teacher, and a participant. Exploration reached both outward and inward. Orbital stations and distant colonies in space were designed to continue the resonance network, extending humanity's consciousness beyond the planet. Simultaneously, inner exploration became paramount, mapping the neural, emotional, and vibrational architecture of human minds. The brain, body, and consciousness were understood as resonant instruments capable of interacting with planetary and cosmic frequencies. Training programs taught humans to perceive subtle vibrations, align with them, and consciously influence their environment. Those who mastered these skills became nodes of guidance, not rulers, helping entire regions achieve collective equilibrium. Even mortality was integrated into the philosophy. Death was understood as a transformation of resonance, the continuation of energy patterns into the collective field. Communities celebrated transitions rather than mourned, honoring the contribution of each individual to the global symphony. Memory was no longer bound to records alone. It existed in vibrations, patterns, and harmonics that could be perceived, decoded, and woven into ongoing life. In a sense, every being became immortal not through form, but through participation in the network of resonance. Conflict, the age-old shadow of civilization, was transformed. Wars became almost inconceivable, not through moral persuasion, but because the consequences of disharmony were immediate and undeniable. Communities could sense subtle imbalances, misaligned intentions, and negative frequencies. Interventions focused on recalibration rather than conquest. The art of diplomacy became the art of harmonic negotiation, understanding, tuning, and integrating the conflicting resonances until balance was restored. Weapons, once tools of destruction, became instruments of modulation, devices capable of dispersing dissonance, amplifying harmony, or neutralizing destructive energies. Global memory was centralized in the concept of living archives. These were not buildings, nor purely digital repositories, but networked resonance nodes where the past, present, and potential future coexisted. Anyone could access knowledge by aligning themselves with the field, feeling history as vibration rather than reading it as text. Ancient wisdom, including knowledge once hoarded by the Anunnaki and the Watchers, became universally accessible, encoded not as power, but as guidance. The ethics of access were simple. Intention and attunement mattered more than rank or status. Cities, forests, oceans, and skies were interwoven into a planetary lattice. Travel between nodes was not only physical, but resonant. Tuning oneself to the frequency of a distant place could transmit insight, knowledge, or even presence across thousands of kilometers. Time, too, became fluid. The linear progression of past, present, and future was supplemented by a perception of pattern and rhythm, allowing humans to anticipate consequences, align with cycles, and consciously participate in events yet to unfold. And across this network, the echo of the Anunnaki and the Watchers persisted not as gods or rulers, but as teachers and resonant guides. Their presence was felt in ruins, in myths, in star alignments, in geometric precision embedded in ancient structures. Humanity now understood them not as beings to be worshipped, but as exemplars of what it meant to exist in harmony with cosmic forces. They had left the physical world, but the resonance they had taught, the principles they had encoded, endured in the lattice of life itself. The final lesson of the convergence was profound in its simplicity. Existence is resonance. Everything is vibration, frequency, and interaction. To live well is to attune oneself, to create harmony, and to participate in the ongoing symphony of the universe. The world had become a canvas, an instrument, and a conscious organism. Humans were no longer separate, they were active collaborators in the maintenance and evolution of life, of consciousness, and of the cosmos itself. As night fell over the harmonized cities and glowing landscapes, the stars above were no longer distant, cold, or silent. They shimmered with the recognition of alignment, reflecting humanity's resonance back to those who had once walked among them. Somewhere in the cosmos, other nodes awaited, perhaps other civilizations listening, observing, participating in the grand network. And somewhere, within each human heart and mind, the frequency of the Watchers and the Anunnaki pulsed quietly, a reminder of memory, knowledge, and potential. The convergence was not an ending, it was a beginning in which humanity remembered its true role, not as masters or servants, but as resonant participants in a living, conscious universe. The myths of gods, the whispers of sky beings, the fragments of forgotten history all converged into a single understanding. To resonate is to exist. To exist is to harmonize, and through harmony, consciousness endures. The field hummed, softly, persistently, eternally. Every thought, every act, every heartbeat contributed to its song, and if one listened closely, truly listened, they could hear it, the faint, unbroken whisper of the Watchers, calling not from above, but from within. The universe was alive, and humanity had finally learned to sing with it. In the quiet hum of the resonant world, humanity stood not as conquerors of nature, but as its chorus. The convergence had not ended, it had stabilized, pulsing gently through oceans, cities, and stars. Every breath, every thought, every tone added to the eternal composition. And when the winds rose at dusk, and the auroras shimmered faintly across the sky, people would pause and listen, not for voices from above, but for the harmonies within the echo of memory, the rhythm of existence, the song of all things united. No longer separate, no longer seeking. Humanity had found its place, not at the center of the cosmos, but within its melody. The universe sang, and at last, humanity sang back.